Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on Laid Back the Atirozinga podcast. Our topic for this week is powering Africa with hydrogen. And our guest for this week is Dr. Michael Taiwo, who is a social entrepreneur, consultant, and a former head of hydrogen operations, Shell USA. Dr. Michael has a doctorate in chemical engineering from the University of Arkansas in the United States. Hello, Dr. Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for honoring the invitation. But first and foremost, can you tell us about your journey? Because I know you went from academia, went into research before you now went into Shell. Could you just tell us a little bit about your journey from academia to Shell?
Yes, thank you. I started with chemical engineering in my bachelor's. And I finished my chemical engineering degree with a first class. And after my bachelor's, I really didn't feel like I know enough to go into the industry. So I decided to go for my PhD in chemical engineering in the US. I did my bachelor's in Nigeria.
Okay.
So that was why I went to the US and studied a PhD.
Okay.
And then after my PhD, okay, I feel like at least I know one or two things now.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to stay in academia. I really didn't want to be a professor. And I'm just going to be honest here. One of the reasons is to pay. The academia just doesn't pay as much as the industry. So
fair enough. Yeah.
So I went into the industry. I got a number of offers. I decided to go with Shell, mainly because Shell has a large presence in Nigeria, and I was thinking, if I ever wanted to go back home, maybe this is a good company to stay with. That way I can, go back home with them. In my journey in Shell, I've taken several roles, and the last one I took was actually the most exciting, which is what we're talking about today, hydrogen.
Yeah.
And after a while, again, the same thing that led me to leave Nigeria and to go to Shell is still pushing me now, which is how can I make more impact?
Yeah.
How can I push myself to do the things that probably scares me and maybe scares other people, and that is go off on my own and do my own thing, leveraging my knowledge to even make a wider impact in the industry. So that's what I do today. I consult for companies that are in hydrogen, and also on the side I do some other businesses that would ultimately help the society.
Interesting. But you keep talking about hydrogen, and you did mention that Shell has a huge presence in Nigeria. Why the interest in hydrogen?
That's a very good question. So hydrogen is it's a energy dense molecule, meaning pound for pound, a pound of hydrogen packs more energy than, say, a pound of diesel or a pound of gasoline. So it's a very energy dense molecule, and that's what we need going forward, because the world is going to need more energy, not less. Another interest in hydrogen is because it burns cleanly. When you burn hydrogen, your product will be water. Hydrogen plus oxygen gives you H2O, water.
Yeah.
So because it's clean burning, people like that. So as we begin to contemplate a future where we cannot afford to pollute and emit more CO2 because of its global warming potentials, we really need to start looking at other sources of energy. And so far, hydrogen is one of those leading candidates.
Interesting. But I read somewhere that there are different types of hydrogen. I saw green, blue, yellow, pink, brown, and the rest of them. Could you just help us to differentiate what's the difference between all these types of hydrogen and how are they produced?
Very good question. So to start with, so that we don't even confuse people further,
Yeah.
all those hydrogens with their colors, they are the same. You know,
Okay.
if a a kilogram of gray hydrogen is the same as a kilogram of pink hydrogen or even white hydrogen. So let's just be clear. The chemical properties, the physical properties,
You
all
meant
of
the
that
same.
is remain the same.
Okay.
The color comes from the sources. Basically, if we say the reason we're talking about hydrogen, the reason there is all this, buzz around it, is because we are concerned about, green energy and sustainability and global warming potential. Then it's good for people to know that not all hydrogen are the same. Not in terms of their physical or chemical properties, but in terms of the way they are manufactured.
Mm.
So green hydrogen is like the best. Why? Because it's hydrogen that you produce from renewable energy. So let's say you have solar power or wind,
Okay.
and you generate electricity. So we agree that's renewable, and then that electricity is used to power an electrolyzer. And an electrolyzer is a plant that converts water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And if that renewable electricity is used to power the electrolyzer, the hydrogen that results from that process, then you can say it's green hydrogen.
Okay.
Why is it green? It's green because you've not had to release a single gram of CO2 into the atmosphere.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's renewable energy, green electricity, and you power the electrolyzer with green electricity. So the hydrogen that comes from that process is pure. Is purity not in terms of like it's polluted by NOx or SOx, but purity in the sense that it's purely renewable electricity. So that's green.
Okay.
That is expensive to make, and that accounts for less than 2% of the hydrogen produced today. Most of the hydrogen produced today, as I'm talking to you, 95% of the hydrogen produced today is by gray hydrogen.
Okay.
And gray hydrogen, you could already tell by the word gray, it's not as clean. It's when you burn natural gas. So CH4, you burn it with and combine it with.
Okay. But for those, sorry for cutting you, but for those who don't know, could you let them know what CH4 is?
So CH4 is methane.
Yeah.
Right. So that's your natural gas. When you so the C means 1 atom of carbon, and the H4 there means 4 atoms of hydrogen. So an atom of carbon is bonded with 4 atoms of hydrogen, and that's the chemical formula for natural gas.
Okay.
Natural gas is mostly methane. Now, if you have CH4 and you add H2O to it, you produce a lot of hydrogen, but also you produce a lot of CO2. And that's why it's, gray, because you're producing hydrogen, but you're also producing a lot of CO2 in the process, and CO2 is exactly what we don't want.
Okay.
So that's why it's called gray. But keep in mind that most of the hydrogen also produced today, it's actually not used for power or electricity, which is going to be the use of the future. Most of the hydrogen produced today is used in things like food processing. Like your margarine that you eat is hydrogenated oil, right? So it's oil with a lot of hydrogen in it. There's a lot of food preservatives that you need hydrogen in. The refining in many refineries use hydrogen. You've probably heard of hydrocracker, where you crack complex crude oils with hydrogen. So when I say, most of the hydrogen produced today is actually dirty, some people will be like, well, so why do we, even if we don't use hydrogen for mobility or for power, we still need hydrogen for some other uses, and that is not a clean process today. Now, if you find a way of remediating the CO2, for instance, if you combine gray hydrogen production with carbon capture, meaning you captured the CO2 produced in the process, then you call it blue hydrogen. So it starts from gray if you're releasing the CO2 into the atmosphere, and then it becomes blue hydrogen if you have a way of remediating the CO2 coming out of the process. The pink, red, and purple is if remember I said green hydrogen is if the source of electricity is renewable.
Yeah.
If the source of electricity is nuclear, if it's a nuclear power plant, because if you think about it, a nuclear power plant doesn't pollute the atmosphere in the sense of you don't release CO2 into the atmosphere in a nuclear power plant. You release some toxic waste at the end of the day, but that's to the ground or to the water, not to the air itself. So there is still the debate out there whether nuclear energy is renewable or should be considered clean energy or not. Regardless, we felt like that should deserve its own color. So if the source of energy is coming from a nuclear power plant into the electrolyzer to produce hydrogen, then that is called pink or purple or red. One more that you probably may not have heard, but that I think is going to be the game changer in the future is white hydrogen.
Okay.
Like
why?
White. So white hydrogen is hydrogen that you actually drill for. Remember, up until this point, what we do is we produce hydrogen. You either produce it through an electrolyzer or steam methane reforming that I talked about, or even things like pyrolysis, where you just you burn carbon itself. But what if there are actually hydrogen deposits in the ground and we can just drill for it, the same way we drill for oil and gas and we drill for water in some places in the world? What if we can just drill for hydrogen? That is going to be a game changer. And luckily, in Africa, in the US, even now in Australia and in France, we're beginning to find hydrogen deposits where you can just go and drill for it.
Interesting.
And the hydrogen that is produced via that process is called white hydrogen.
Okay.
So again, those are the colors of hydrogen. It relates to the sources of the hydrogen. It's a way just to let people see, how, for lack of a better word, clean energy the hydrogen is. It has nothing to do with its chemical or physical properties.
Interesting. So, because the first time I heard green, blue, I was wondering why is it like a colorless gas like hydrogen has so many colors. So, but it's good. It's good that at least you've clarified that. But you mentioned one of the applications of hydrogen, like in our margarine. Are there other applications how we can actually use all these different types of hydrogen?
Yeah, again, because whatever color you call it, the chemical and the physical properties remain the same. So you can use all of this hydrogen anywhere. The same thing you can use a green hydrogen for, you can use a pink hydrogen for, or a white hydrogen for. So let's be clear on that. The applications of hydrogen that already exist today, like I said, in margarine, cosmetics, food processing, and a big part also is in refining, where we use it to crack or refined crude oils. But that has existed for decades. Why are we all talking about hydrogen today? It's most of the buzz or talk about hydrogen today is about how we can use hydrogen going forward, especially in the context of climate change. And it's using hydrogen for mobility, using it to power our trains and airplanes and ships and cars and buses, and also using it as a source of energy. So instead of having just a normal regular power plant to power your home, you have a hydrogen cell powering your home.
Interesting. So, if we focus on using hydrogen to power our homes, looking at the grand scheme of things, what do you think is the future of hydrogen as a source of energy?
The future is quite promising, and the reason I say that is because there is a lot of research that is going into hydrogen today, and the research are also showing very promising results. So why do we still need to do the research? Because we want to bring the cost down. The biggest disadvantage of hydrogen today is it's expensive. So we need to bring the cost down, and we can only get there by more research and development. And also and maybe we'll talk about this later, does the right policy framework that would catalyze its mass adoption to the masses. But in the future, the main use of hydrogen will be hydrogen for mobility, using it to power our homes, our factories, and also using it in some typically energy intensive industry like the making of steel or cement. Those are very power hungry industry that can use an energy dense source like hydrogen.
Okay. Interesting. But now but I've been reading about like the huge interest in developing green hydrogen all over the world. But he did mention that it's just 2% of all the hydrogen out there. So how come there's this huge talk or hype about it as a means to build renewable energy? And how do you think I use it to build renewable energy in Africa if it just makes up only 2% of the total hydrogen out there?
Okay, so let me clarify my 2% comment.
Okay.
I said 2% of the hydrogen out there today is green hydrogen.
Okay.
Remember, there are different types of hydrogen colors, right? Like we said. So 2% is green. Majority of the hydrogen produced today is still green. So just to clarify, but you're still right. I don't know the exact number, but it's still low. The amount of hydrogen as a source of energy today is still quite low. Okay, so that's still true. Why there is a hype for it is because it is, if we want to continue our prosperity in the world, meaning we still need energy, to move around, to power our homes, to power our devices, and we don't want to keep polluting the environment because the energy we have today is polluting the environment, then necessarily we need to look for other sources of energy that will not pollute the environment. And hydrogen is a leading candidate. There is, of course, solar, there is wind, but that would not be appropriate in everywhere. And that is even why hydrogen is important, because hydrogen can act. You could carry it around the same way you could carry oil and gas around. So let me give you
Hmm.
an example.
Okay.
Let's say it's not everywhere the wind is going to blow. It's not everywhere the sun is going to shine. So that's the challenge with this solar and wind. Well, let's say, for instance, in sub-Sahara Africa, we have a lot of desert, right?
Hmm.
And if you have solar farms in there and you generate solar electricity, how can you get the electricity down to maybe a place like Port Harcourt or Lagos that needs it, even though you're generating the electricity in the desert in Niger or in Mali or in Senegal? You can do that with hydrogen, because that electricity that you're producing at the source, if you couple it with an electrolyzer, then you can produce hydrogen, and then you can then ship the hydrogen to where it's needed. Just the same way you produce oil in Saudi, and then you ship the oil to France to refine, and people in France can use the oil that was produced in Saudi. You could do the same with hydrogen. So we can have, a place where it makes sense to have solar energy, or a place where it makes sense to have wind energy, and the excess energy that is being produced there can be converted using electrolysis as a method to hydrogen, and that hydrogen can then be transported to anywhere in the world that is needed, and all of that with no emissions to the atmosphere. So that's what is exciting about it.
Okay, but you did mention that recently they found like hydrogen in Africa, like the white hydrogen in Africa in the ground. So is there any way we can actually refine or convert the white hydrogen? I know you need electrolyzer, process of electrolysis to convert water into hydrogen and oxygen to get the green one. Is there any way we can convert the white one to the green hydrogen and use it to fuel Africa? Can that work?
Yeah, so that's the beauty. That's why I said the white hydrogen might be the game changer. You don't even need to convert it, right?
Yeah.
It's naturally occurring. You produce it, and like everything that's naturally occurring, you probably need to purify it a little bit. Maybe there might be some other compounds or elements in it, but it's already there. And I think that's actually what might bring the cost down, because the crude oil and the natural gas that we talk about today too, we produce it from the ground, but we have to treat it, we have to refine it, we have to clean it up before it becomes useful. So we can do the same for hydrogen too, and still not add a lot of cost to it. So the white hydrogen that you produce from the ground doesn't even have to go through the electrolysis method, because it's already there.
Yeah.
Maybe it has some impurities that you have to remove. But the Mali was the very first place that it was discovered, and since then other discoveries have been popping up. So hopefully even more deposits are discovered. And this is really sounding like the history of the oil and gas industry too.
Yeah.
Like, just one well was first discovered, and then another one, and then another one, and then the geologists really went to work, and they started finding other places where you can find oil. So that's why I feel that might be the game changer, because if we can find more hydrogen deposits and drill for it, we can power Africa, we can power the world.
Interesting. Okay, but because you mentioned oil drilling exploration, if we compare hydrogen now to the fossil fuels like oil and gas, natural gas, in terms of environmental impact, I know you've talked about carbon and the rest of them, energy efficiency. How do you think hydrogen compare with these fossil fuels in terms of energy efficiency and environmental impact?
So in terms of energy efficiency, is much more efficient. That's why if you really need a lot of energy, you want to use hydrogen, and that's one of the attractive things about it. Rockets, for instance, the fuel for rockets is not diesel, it's not jet fuel, it's hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, because you need a lot of energy to shoot something off of the Earth's gravitational pull and make it go fast. So all those rockets that you see, sometimes you see Elon Musk always posting pictures of the rockets that SpaceX is launching. That's liquid hydrogen right there. So in terms of the energy density, hydrogen eclipses all this conventional fuel. In terms of the environmental impact, that's why we have to give them different colors, right? So green hydrogen, very little environmental impact. Gray hydrogen has a lot of environmental impact. Blue, somewhere between gray and green, because the CO2 was produced, but now it's been captured or it's been somehow, abated, maybe by buying carbon credits and things like that. So I would say the environmental impact depends on the color of the hydrogen, but again, given that these colors just refer to their energy sources, all of the colors of hydrogen, regardless of which one, is still energy dense and packs more punch than any conventional fuels out there.
Okay, but talking about the environment, because I know you mentioned the climate, right? Is there any way we can actually use these different types of hydrogen to solve climate crisis in any way?
There are several things to the climate crisis. Let me just start by saying it's a complex problem. And it's a complex problem, and so not one thing is going to solve the climate crisis. A lot of things will have to come together at the right time in the right amount to solve a multi-generational global problem like the climate crisis. So I need to start with that. But how can hydrogen contribute? How can hydrogen be part of the solution? It will be to find an environmentally friendly way to produce it, or to invest more in exploration so that we can find these hydrogen deposits
all over the world.
All over the world and just drill for it.
Okay.
And like I said, it's very promising, because at least in the last 10 years now, we've witnessed some discoveries. If we invest more research, more money into exploring, more deposits can be found, I'm sure. And the only reason I'm positive about this is it's happened before in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
So like when oil, the very first well that was drilled in the oil and gas industry in 1859 in Pennsylvania, USA, it was just, the oil was just oozing from the ground. They didn't even have to drill, and then they started drilling around that area, and then they found more, and then they started thinking, okay, how can we get more? And then later, nobody even thought then that you could find oil in the ocean. Now we have, offshore facilities.
Yeah.
Nobody thought then that you could find oil in the desert. And now, a place like Saudi is one of the biggest producers in the world.
Mhm.
Nobody thought you could find oil under the ice. And
Ice.
Russia, yeah,
Wow.
I mean, Russia, there are so many oil producing regions in the Arctic region.
Yeah.
So, now you practically could find oil anywhere. So there is a precedent for, if with enough time, enough research, enough experimentation, you could start finding all these things where you thought they would not exist. So the optimistic part of me says hydrogen is going to follow a similar arc.
Interesting. But I also saw somewhere that you can convert waste to hydrogen.
Yes,
How does that work?
and that is green hydrogen too.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't mention that before.
Yeah.
So green just means that the source is renewable. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are using an electrolyzer.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It just means that the source is renewable.
Yeah.
So remember how I said that you burn natural gas and then it produces CO2 and water, and then the CO2 is what we don't like because it's polluting the atmosphere, and we call that gray hydrogen. We're calling it gray hydrogen because the natural gas itself is dirty. But there is renewable natural gas, meaning natural gas that you produce not by drilling for it, but by renewable means. One of the sources of renewable natural gas is waste. So if you decompose waste, maybe in a biodigester or there are several ways to do that, but waste can produce natural gas. The bottom line is you can use waste to produce natural gas. The natural gas produced in that kind of a process is renewable natural gas. Now, just like the colors of hydrogen, just because they call it renewable natural gas doesn't mean its chemical properties are different from the natural gas. No, it's not. It's still CH4, it's still methane. If you burn it with water, it's still going to produce hydrogen and CO2. And the hydrogen produced in this process is green as well. Even though you're using steam methane reforming, but because your source is not the normal fossil fuel natural gas, but natural gas from waste, is called green hydrogen. So when somebody is telling you that they're using waste to produce green hydrogen, that's why. Technically, what they're doing is they're using waste to generate renewable natural gas, and the renewable natural gas is converted to hydrogen.
Interesting. Now, this makes it more interesting. So since we can actually get the green hydrogen from process of electrolysis and conversion of waste to hydrogen, we can get the gray one. We can get the white one in deposit. And you mentioned one of the first places we found the hydrogen deposit is Mali in Africa. So do you think Africa can become the hydrogen capital of the world?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. I think if we can find it in Mali, we can find it in Senegal, we can find it in Nigeria, we can find it. I think we can find it everywhere. I don't think we've been looking as much as we should. But I believe that we could find it in all of these places. And when we do, it's going to be a good source of energy for us. Maybe we can even find it in enough quantities that we can. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes, I believe it.
Interesting. Okay, but he said we haven't been looking. Is it that they, um, since we have like huge presence of share on the rest of them in Africa, is it that the African governments, the leaders, they are not, they don't know that they should be looking for this, or they haven't bothered to actually assign the power, or the federal ministry and the rest of them start looking for these hydrogen deposits and all in Africa? Why do you think they haven't started searching for it like that?
People still see all of this climate change, green energy, and all of that. People still see it as more of a like rich man's problem, for lack of a better word to put it. They like, well, me, I just need enough energy to power my country. Whether it's clean or not, whether it pollutes the environment or not, that is a problem for the future. So a place like Nigeria now, for instance, more energy will be spent looking for oil and gas, or making sure that we produce the maximum oil and gas that we can, than they will spend on looking for a hydrogen source. So exactly. So that's what I think is powering it. In a place like the US, I can tell you that they are spending more looking for these sources. There are some startup companies, some of them sponsored by Bill Gates, that have found success in drilling for some wells in Denver, Colorado, and they still continue looking around.
Interesting.
So even though I think we have the deposits, the will to look for it might not be there for now.
Hopefully in the nearest future, I hope they'll find a will. But before we get to that, we've been talking about hydrogen powering the world and powering Africa. But are there any challenges associated with actually using hydrogen as a power source?
Yeah. It's, if you think about fire, right? Fire is very useful, but fire is also dangerous. We use fire to cook food and keep warm and refine things, but fire also can burn things down, right? So the same thing with hydrogen too. Hydrogen is very flammable. It's very explosive. I mean, there is a bomb called hydrogen bomb, and it's a very nasty bomb. It's really like as nasty as an atomic weapon. So and that's one of the areas of research too, how to make it safer. It's already safe. It's as safe as fossil fuel, or but how to make it safer. That's the challenge of researchers and scientists, even as we speak right now. But yeah, so I would say the challenge is hydrogen is very flammable. It's 14 times lighter than air, so it wants to escape, it wants to disperse, and it takes very little to ignite it. So those are all the things that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about hydrogen.
Okay. Interesting. But apart from being flammable, is there any other challenge to the hydrogen, and any way we can actually avert or solve these challenges?
Well, the challenge is So I've talked about a technical challenge, flammability, but the non-technical challenge is cost. Is expensive. So the way to solve that is really to increase the economies of scale. So if there is more people doing it, then the price is going to go down. And the way to have more people using it is by government policy. So government needs to kind of support it and then start putting incentives in place to catalyze its starting, and if it's already started in an area, its mass adoption. So I would say the right government policies will solve the problem of scale, and if the problem of scale is solved, the cost comes down. If the cost comes down, more people use it, and then it just becomes a virtuous circle where it becomes reinforcing.
Okay, but away from hydrogen now, you recently announced that you'll be leaving Shell. What are the plans for the future? Since you're leaving hydrogen entirely, so what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, so I left Shell exactly because I wanted to make more impact in hydrogen.
Okay.
Shell, and this is publicly available information. Shell has made some recent strategic shifts in hydrogen that necessitated me to have to, for me to remain in Shell, I will have to do something other than hydrogen, which I don't want to. I think this industry has way more room to grow, and I decided to not leave Shell for another company, but just to start on my own and start consulting for companies that want to take hydrogen seriously, or curious about hydrogen, or already starting hydrogen and needs advice on how to implement it and things to watch out for. So that's what I do now. I consult for companies that are in the hydrogen industry.
Okay.
I think I can make more impact on the industry as a whole if I'm just like I don't want to say like a godfather, but like if I'm just like a resource or a consultant that companies can come to, and then I can point them in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. This is good. But you also run an education charity, the Michael Taiwo Scholarship Scheme.
Yes.
What's the inspiration behind it? Because I know you've reached over 50 countries. So what's the inspiration behind why did you start that scheme?
And that's why this scheme is called the Michael Taiwo Scholarship, really, because I just wanted to help people that were like me many years ago.
Okay.
So many years ago, I was bright. I finished with a first class, but I didn't come from money, so money was hard to come by, and it was very difficult for me to pay for the exam fees and to pay for the application school fees that I needed to secure an admission into the United States. So it was a challenge for me, and I wrote about it somewhere that was actually the biggest challenge that I ever faced. It was even more challenging than finishing with the first class. And also too, just because there were not that many people that I knew then who did what I was about to do, it was difficult finding information. So on one side, it was difficult to find the information that I needed. On the other side, even when I had the information, it was difficult for me to pay.
Yeah.
And then the payment comes in two challenges. One is just coming up with the money. The second one is coming up with, even when you have the money, many schools and GRE and things like that, they don't want to take your credit card if you're from Nigeria because they think we are fraudulent. So many times when you want to pay, they're like, oh no, if you're from Nigeria, you can't pay online. So you have to kind of look for somebody already in the States to help you pay.
Yeah.
So all of this is like, if you're counting, that's like 3 different challenges stacking up, and it could stop somebody that is brilliant and have achieved a lot in school, and actually even determined. It can stop them from pursuing their dreams.
True.
And before you know it, they just take the next job they could find and settle down.
Yeah.
So I started it to help people that were in my shoes, and all of this happened in 2005, 2006. So people that were in my shoes in around that time, that was the kind of people I'm trying to help. People who've done well for themselves, but who needs guidance, information, the financial assistance to pay for all of these entrance fees, and even the mode of payment.
Yeah.
That's why I started it in 2019, and yeah, the response has been overwhelming. I never knew it was going to go this reaching out to almost every corner of the globe. Every year when we put out the application, I learned the name of a new country, because I just see like applicants from countries that I don't even know their names.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? There is a country called Eswatini? Okay.
Yeah. That's Tanzania, isn't it? Yeah.
It used to be former Swaziland.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew Swaziland, but I didn't know they've changed their name
to Eswatini. Oh, nice.
Until I saw it on one of the applications. I was like, whoa, interesting.
Interesting. That's a good thing you're doing right there. Because I had a similar case in my own journey as well, and it's good that you're actually helping people, because, like I said, coming from Africa, sometimes you are at a very huge disadvantage. So keep doing what you're doing. But because of time, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I want you to think about it. You left Shell, where you were head of hydrogen operations, and to become a consultant in to still consult for different companies dealing with hydrogen. If you are assuming right now you are given the mantle to change Nigeria using hydrogen, maybe like you utilize hydrogen to ensure the power issue in Nigeria is resolved, how do you think you'd go about that?
I'm going to pattern it after California. So, I'm calling you right now from Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
And the reason I'm in California is because of hydrogen. And it's because California is doing so many things right when it comes to hydrogen.
Okay.
So I'm going to enact, I'm not going to go into details, but the short answer will be, I will use California as the starting point, and then I'm going to edit it to fit the Nigerian context.
Okay.
But as far as hydrogen is concerned, I will, and this is, by the way, this is the advice I've given head of states before. I've spoken with some presidents of other countries really thinking about hydrogen, and what I do tell them is, start with what was done in California, and change whatever aspects you think will not work in your for your country or for your province.
Okay.
So I'm just going to take my own advice, because that's really what I've advised people.
Yeah.
In that capacity.
Okay. And has any of the head of states ever taken your advice to do that in their own country?
So they have. It's a long journey. It's not like, oh yeah, okay, we had this meeting today and then tomorrow I expect to see changes. It's you have to enact laws, and if you know anything about laws, you first need to socialize it with lawmakers. You need to you need to pass a bill. They will vote for it. During all of that, maybe some aspects will change. So it takes a while. I can tell you that they are on their way,
Yeah.
but it takes a while for these things to move through.
Okay.
Even California is still tweaking their own formula. It's not like California has arrived.
Yeah.
But they have learned a lot of lessons that people don't need to reinvent the wheel on.
Yeah.
That's why I usually say, start there to save you a few.
Instead of making the
few
same
years.
mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you, Dr. Michael. This is all the time we have for this week, and I learned a lot about hydrogen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's an honor.